I held the certified check from the settlement, its weight feeling far more significant than a simple piece of paper. The amount, with its string of zeros, was a satisfying final chapter to the $10 million audit that had ripped their predatory practices into the light. But to understand how that check came to be in my hand, we have to go back 3 months to a fight that started over a single, infuriating $15 fee. My world, back then, was one of spreadsheets and grant proposals. I was a project manager for a small nonprofit, the kind that runs on shoestring budgets and sheer force of will. My job was to turn donated dollars into tangible good, and I treated that responsibility like a sacred trust. For the past 2 years, my baby had been the Westwood Community Youth Center. I'd overseen its construction from a derelict warehouse into a vibrant, safe space for kids. I knew the cost of every 2x4, the price per gallon of low VOC paint, and the name of the electrician's dog. My days were spent chasing down invoices, cross-referencing purchase orders, and haggling with suppliers for a 10% discount on flooring. Every penny was a promise to the community, a promise I intended to keep. When a donor gave us $100, they expected $100 worth of good to come from it, not $98 after administrative costs. I stretched every dollar until it screamed. My meticulousness wasn't just a personality trait, it was a moral obligation. My colleagues would joke that I could find a rounding error on a receipt from a year ago, and they weren't wrong. This dedication to fiscal minutiae extended to my personal life, and at the center of my personal finances was Pioneer Community Bank. They were my first bank, the one my parents set me up with for my high school savings account. Their branding was all about small-town values and neighborly trust, with commercials featuring smiling families and golden retrievers. I'd been a loyal customer for over 15 years, entrusting them with my meager savings, my direct deposits, and the small fundraising checks I'd occasionally process for the nonprofit. I knew the tellers by name, and they knew me. I remember walking into the familiar, slightly dated lobby just a week before everything imploded. The air smelled of industrial carpet cleaner and free coffee. Brenda, a personal banker with a helmet of blonde hair and a smile that never quite reached her eyes, waved me over to her desk. "Sarah! So good to see you," she chirped, her voice a little too loud. "Another miracle for the youth center?" I slid a small check from a local bake sale across the polished wood of her desk. "Every little bit helps, Brenda. You know how it is." "Oh, we just admire what you do so much," she said, her fingers tapping on her keyboard. "You're a true pillar of this community, and we at Pioneer are just so proud to be your financial partner." The corporate jargon always made my skin crawl a little. We weren't partners. I was a customer, and they were a service provider. "Speaking of partnership," she continued, her smile widening a fraction, "have you had a chance to think about upgrading to our Platinum Rewards checking account? Based on your loyalty, you're pre-qualified, and it comes with some fantastic travel benefits." "I appreciate the offer, Brenda, but I don't really travel," I said politely. "The basic checking is all I need. Keep it simple." Of course! We just want to make sure our Pioneer family is always getting the absolute best we have to offer," she cooed, sliding my deposit receipt back to me. "You have a wonderful day now." I walked out of the bank feeling the way I always did after talking to Brenda, like I just had a conversation with a marketing brochure. That phrase, Pioneer family, echoed in my mind. It was meant to sound warm and inclusive, but it felt like a cage. A family is supposed to have your back. A family doesn't nickel and dime you. A family certainly doesn't hide things in the fine print. I had no idea how soon I'd learn just how disingenuous that sentiment really was. The fuse was lit a week later, not with a bang, but with a quiet digital flicker on my online banking portal. A new line item under my checking account activity, monthly service fee, $15. I blinked. $15. It wasn't a life-altering amount, but it was wrong. This was a free checking account. It had been free for 15 years. I scrolled back through months of statements. It had never been there before. This wasn't a mistake. It was a policy change, one they had snuck in without a word. My blood began to simmer. This was exactly the kind of financial sleight of hand I fought against in my professional life. I walked back into that same lobby the next day, bypassing Brenda's chirpy greeting and asking to speak directly with the branch manager. A man named David Henderson, with a tie slightly too tight for his neck and the weary posture of someone who dealt with complaints all day, led me to a small, glass-walled office. "How can I help you?" he asked, gesturing to a chair without making eye contact, his attention already on his computer monitor. I laid my printed statement on his desk, my finger tapping the offending line. "I'd like to understand this charge. My understanding is that this is a free checking account." He sighed, a long put-upon sound. "We sent out notifications 2 months ago. We've upgraded our account structures. The old, basic free account no longer exists. It's now the Pioneer Advantage account, which carries a $15 monthly fee unless you maintain a $5,000 minimum daily balance." "I received no such notification," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "And I find it interesting that this change happened right after I deposited a significant check for the nonprofit." This was the real heart of the matter. 3 days prior, I had deposited the capstone donation for the Westwood Center's new playground, a $50,000 grant from a local foundation. The check was made out to the nonprofit, but for logistical reasons involving the foundation's bylaws, it had to be processed through a personal account of a project manager before being transferred to the center's main fund. It was a clunky system, but one we'd used before. Henderson's eyes flickered with something. Annoyance? Recognition? He typed for a moment. Ah, yes. The $50,000 deposit. He swiveled in his chair, a smug little smile playing on his lips. "That check is also why your account was flagged. Per the new fee schedule, which you would have seen in the notification, any non-payroll check over $10,000 is subject to an automatic 10 business day hold and a 1% processing fee." The air left my lungs. "A 1% fee? You're charging me $500 to deposit a donation check?" "It's for the community's protection," he said, the words sounding rehearsed and hollow, "to prevent fraud." "This isn't fraud. This is a grant for a children's playground. I have the grant award letter. I have the foundation's contact information. You can verify it in 10 minutes. My voice was rising, and I didn't care. "In a 10-day hold? I have to pay the equipment supplier by Friday. Or the nonprofit gets hit with a late penalty, and we lose our installation slot. That money needs to be available." I was pleading now, laying out the damage this would cause. I explained that a $500 fee was the equivalent of 100 winter coats for kids. I explained that a delay meant the playground wouldn't be built before the fall rains came. I was appealing to him as a member of the community, as a partner, as part of the Pioneer family. He listened, his expression hardening from boredom to outright contempt. He saw my passion not as a sign of dedication, but as a weakness. "Miss," he said, leaning forward, his voice dropping to a low, condescending murmur, "the bank has policies for a reason. We can't make exceptions just because you think your project is special. It's not about it being special. It's about it being right." I shot back. "I've been a customer here for 15 years. The nonprofit has banked with you for 10. We deserve to have this fee waived and the hold lifted. The kids in this community deserve it." Henderson leaned back, a cruel little glint in his eye. He looked at my simple professional clothes, at my earnest pleading face, and made a judgment. He saw a bleeding heart nobody, not a high net worth client worth placating. "You want a waiver?" He scoffed, the smile turning into a sneer. "You don't deserve it." The words hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was the casual, dismissive cruelty of it. He was telling me that my work, my dedication, the needs of the children I was fighting for, were all worthless in the face of their predatory new rules. I was not a partner. I was a mark. I stood there for a second, the sound of the lobby fading to a dull roar, and I knew this was more than just a fee. This was a declaration of war. And I'll tell you, if you're not subscribed to this channel yet, you are definitely going to want to stick around to see how I fought back. Because in that moment, staring into the smug face of Pioneer Community Bank, I decided I wasn't just getting that $500 back. I was going to find every single dollar they had unjustly taken from every single person they had wronged, and I was going to take it all back. His words hung in the sterile air of the office, sharp and cold. You don't deserve it. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a judgment. A dismissal of me, my work, and the community I served. For a moment, I just stared at him, the sound of my own blood roaring in my ears. The initial shock gave way to a surge of pure, hot fury. But I couldn't afford fury. Fury wouldn't get the playground built. I took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing the anger down. I had to try one more time. I had to be the reasonable one. "Mr. Henderson," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt deep in my bones. "Let's put the playground aside for a moment and just be logical. I have been a customer at this specific branch for 15 years. My credit is perfect. I have never overdrawn my account. I am, by any definition, a loyal customer in good standing." I folded my hands on his desk, leaning forward just enough to command his attention. "Now, you've instituted a new fee structure. Fine. But according to federal regulations, specifically Regulation E, you are required to provide notice of changes to terms and conditions at least 21 days in advance. I can tell you with absolute certainty that I received no such notice, either by mail or electronically. So this $15 fee? It's not just unfair, it's improperly levied." He blinked, a flicker of surprise in his eyes that I'd brought up regulations, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same wall of indifference. "Our records show the notifications were sent," he said flatly. "If you didn't read your mail, that's not the bank's problem." "And the $500 fee?" I pressed on, refusing to be stonewalled. "The check is from a highly respected local foundation. I have the grant letter right here in my bag. You can call them. You can verify the funds in minutes. There is zero risk of fraud. This policy is clearly meant to apply to questionable, unverifiable transactions, not a certified grant for a nonprofit project. I'm asking you to use your discretion as branch manager and waive a fee that is being misapplied." I laid it all out for him, the logic, the loyalty, the law. I wasn't a hysterical woman getting emotional over her special project. I was a project manager presenting a clear-cut case. I was giving him an out. He could be the hero, the reasonable manager who fixed a problem for a long-time customer in a community charity. He just looked at me. Then, a small, ugly sound escaped his lips. It was a chuckle, a short, sharp puff of air that was more contempt than humor. He leaned back in his squeaking chair, spreading his hands as if explaining something to a simple-minded child. "Discretion," he repeated, the word tasting like poison in his mouth. He laughed again, louder this time. It was a dry, grating sound that filled the small office. "You walk in here with your little bake sale checks and your sob story about a playground, and you think you can tell me about federal regulations? You think quoting some rule you Googled 5 minutes ago puts you on my level?" He leaned forward, the smug smile back in full force. "Let me tell you how this works. We are a business, a multi-million-dollar business. Those fees, the one you think is improperly levied and the one you think is misapplied, they're part of our profit model. A very successful one, I might add. Your loyalty, your 15 years, your feelings, they aren't a line item on our balance sheet. You are a number, and your number is too small to matter." He stood up, a clear dismissal. "Your request is denied. The fees and the hold are final. Is there anything else?" I felt the floor drop out from under me. It was the laughter that did it, the sneer I could handle, the condescension I could fight. But being laughed at, being treated like my entire earnest, logical appeal was a child's tantrum, it broke something inside me. I was utterly, completely powerless. I had no leverage. He was right. I was a nobody. My little nonprofit world of stretching pennies and believing in the good of the community meant nothing here. This was the real world, and in the real world, The house always wins. I couldn't form a reply. I just turned and walked out of his office, my legs feeling like lead. The familiar lobby, with Brenda's plastic smile and the smell of stale coffee, felt alien and hostile. Every friendly-sounding teller, every poster advertising community-first banking was a lie. I was a mark. We were all marks. They had built a business on a foundation of trust, and now they were systematically mining that trust for profit, laughing at anyone who dared to call them on it. I pushed through the heavy glass door and stumbled out into the afternoon sun. I stood on the sidewalk, the sounds of traffic washing over me, and the full weight of the situation crashed down. $500 was gone. The $15 fee would be there next month, and the month after that. The playground was in jeopardy. The kids were going to lose their chance because of a man in a cheap suit who found my dedication laughable. Desperation clawed at my throat. What could I possibly do? I was just one person, one small, insignificant number. I spent the first hour back in my apartment in a state of numb shock. I'd called the playground supplier and begged for an extension, my voice hollow. They were sympathetic but firm. The schedule was packed, and a delay would push our installation back by months, past the rainy season and into the next spring. The kids wouldn't have their playground. Henderson's mocking laughter echoed in my head, a soundtrack to my failure. Despair is a thick, heavy blanket. I sat on my couch, the city lights beginning to glitter outside my window, and felt myself sinking into it. He was right. I was a nobody. I could close my account, take the $500 hit for the nonprofit, and spend the rest of my life telling people what a terrible, predatory institution Pioneer Community Bank was. But what would that change? Nothing. They had the power, they had the money, and they had the contemptuous laughter of men who know they'll never face consequences. But my mind, trained by years of managing complex projects, doesn't know how to quit. It sees a problem and immediately starts breaking it down, looking for a critical path, a vulnerability. The anger I'd suppressed in his office began to return, not as a hot flash of fury, but as a cold, controlled burn. He'd laughed at me for quoting a regulation. He'd called my appeal a sob story. He'd dismissed me, but he'd also given me a clue. It's part of our profit model, he'd said, a very successful one. He wasn't talking about my $515. He was talking about a system, and systems have rules. Systems have architecture. Systems have weaknesses. I opened my laptop. The rage was gone, replaced by the familiar obsessive focus I brought to every grant proposal and construction budget. This was just a new project. Burn Pioneer Bank to the ground. I ignored Google. I went straight to the source, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Federal Reserve, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. I spent hours reading, not summaries or articles, but the dense, dry text of the regulations themselves. I downloaded PDFs of the Dodd-Frank Act, the Truth in Savings Act, and yes, the full, unadulterated text of Regulation E, the Electronic Fund Transfer Act. My apartment fell silent, the only sound the click of my keyboard and the soft rustle of printed pages. I was no longer a victim, I was a researcher. Henderson had dismissed me as someone who'd, quote, Googled a rule 5 minutes ago. He had no idea he was talking to a woman who once spent a weekend cross-referencing 3 different concrete suppliers, material safety data sheets, to save a youth center $78 on sealant. This was my arena. Around 2 a.m., surrounded by coffee cups and a web of browser tabs, I found it. It wasn't just about the 21-day notification period for adverse changes. It was deeper than that. I went to Pioneer's website, a place I now viewed with the same distaste as a crime scene. I clicked through the labyrinth of links for personal banking, then account resources, and finally found a hyperlink so small it was almost invisible. Disclosures and fee schedules. A list of PDFs appeared. I downloaded them all, my heart starting to beat a little faster. I opened the most recent account terms and conditions, a 48-page document updated 2 months prior, right on schedule with what Henderson had said. I put it side by side with an old version I'd saved to my hard drive years ago, because of course I had. I was that person. and there it was. On page 37 of the new document, buried in a section titled Account Maintenance and Classification, was a paragraph that hadn't existed before. It was a masterpiece of corporate obfuscation, designed to be skipped over, to be ignored. It read, "To provide our customers with the most appropriate service tier for their transactional needs, account activity is periodically reviewed by our automated systems. Accounts previously classified as basic free checking that receive a single, non-payroll, non-recurring deposit exceeding $10,000 will be automatically reclassified as a Pioneer Advantage account, effective immediately upon settlement of the qualifying deposit. This reclassification is enacted to provide enhanced fraud monitoring and verification services commensurate with a higher risk transaction profile. The fee schedule for the Pioneer Advantage account will apply for the current and all subsequent statement cycles." I read it twice, then a third time. My breath caught in my throat. This was the weapon. This wasn't just a failure to notify, this was a systematic, predatory trap. They had built an algorithm that lay in wait, watching for customers with low balance, free accounts to suddenly get a large sum of money, an inheritance, an insurance settlement, a nonprofit grant. The moment the deposit hit, the trap sprung. The account was automatically reclassified, and the fees began, effective immediately. They weren't just changing the terms on an existing account. They were changing the account itself without explicit opt-in consent. They were punishing customers for receiving money. This was the profit model. Henderson hadn't just misapplied a rule. He had described a bank-wide policy of what the CFPB would call an abusive act or practice. They were taking unreasonable advantage of a consumer's lack of understanding. They had engineered a system to profit from their customers' good fortune, or in my case, their good work. I leaned back in my chair, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. Henderson had laughed at me. He'd said my number was too small to matter. He was about to learn that I wasn't just a number, I was a project manager, and I had just found the fatal flaw in his design. The discovery didn't bring a triumphant shout. It brought a profound and chilling calm. The rage that had burned me hollow was gone, replaced by the quiet, humming focus of a project manager who has just found the critical path. Henderson thought he was a businessman running a profit model. I was about to show him what a real audit looked like. My project plan had a new name: due diligence. My first step was tactical, and it tasted like ash in my mouth: malicious compliance. I had to let them win the battle to ensure they would lose the war. I needed to appear defeated, a lesson learned. This required sacrificing the $500. I called my contact at the playground company, explained there was an unavoidable 10-day delay and a $500 shortfall from the grant due to a bank processing fee. I told him I would cover the $500 personally to ensure the project stayed on track. It was a lie. I would use my own savings to bridge the gap and reimburse myself later, but it was a necessary one. The nonprofit would not suffer for this. With that settled, I began my real work. My small apartment transformed into a war room. I spent the next 2 days compiling my case. This wasn't an angry email. It was a formal submission to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I was no longer Sarah, the flustered victim. I was a whistleblower assembling an indictment. I created a master PDF, my magnum opus of bureaucratic revenge. The first page was a cover letter, concise and professional, stating my belief that Pioneer Community Bank was engaged in a systemic and predatory practice violating the Consumer Financial Protection Act. I cited the specific section regarding abusive acts or practices. Exhibit A was a side-by-side comparison of the old and new fee schedules, with the offending paragraph on page 37 of the new document highlighted in damning yellow. Exhibit B included my bank statements showing 15 years with no service fees, followed by the sudden appearance of the $15 charge. Exhibit C was a meticulously detailed, date and time-stamped narrative of my interactions with the bank, from Brenda's cloying sales pitch to Henderson's final, sneering dismissal. I quoted him verbatim: "Your feelings, they aren't a line item on our balance sheet. You are a number, and your number is too small to matter." I knew those words would resonate with any investigator. My final exhibit was a summary analysis. I argued that the bank's automatic reclassification policy was not a service but a trap. It was designed to exploit customers precisely at a moment of financial gain, using their own money as the trigger for a punitive fee structure they never explicitly agreed to. I projected that if this had happened to me, it was likely happening to hundreds, if not thousands, of other small-number customers across their network. I wasn't just asking for my $515 back. I was requesting a full-scale audit of Pioneer Community Bank's account reclassification practices. Late on a Thursday night, with the finished document gleaming on my screen, I navigated to the CFPB's online complaint portal. I filled in every field with painstaking accuracy, attached my evidence file, and hovered my mouse over the submit button. For a moment, I thought of Henderson's mocking laughter. Then I clicked. The mechanism was set. The wheels were in motion. 10 agonizing business days later, the hold on the grant money was finally lifted. I walked back into the bank, my stomach in a cold knot. My plan required one last act of submission. I went to a young teller I didn't recognize and quietly asked to wire $49,500 from my account to the Westwood Community Youth Center's main account. As she was processing the transaction, a shadow fell over the counter. Well, look who's back. It was Henderson. He'd seen me from his glass-walled office and couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, that same smug sneer plastered on his face. "Making a withdrawal, are we?" he said, his voice loud enough for the people nearby to hear. "I see you finally accepted how things work. Policies are policies after all. It's a tough lesson for some people to learn." The teller looked down, embarrassed. My own hands were steady on the counter. I felt nothing, no anger, no humiliation. Just a vast, serene sense of inevitability. He was a man standing on a trap door, bragging about the sturdiness of the floor. He mistook my silence for shame. "Don't feel too bad," he continued, his voice dripping with condescension. "Think of it as a $500 education in real-world finance. I'm sure your little playground will be just fine without it." He was giving me his final, mocking eulogy. He saw a defeated woman, a nobody who had been put in her place. He had no idea he was speaking to the architect of his bank's impending nightmare. He had no idea that a complaint, armed with his own words and policies, was already sitting in a federal regulator's inbox, a ticking time bomb aimed directly at his precious, quote, profit model. The teller slid the receipt toward me. "You're all set, ma'am." I took it, folded it neatly, and placed it in my purse. I finally looked up at Henderson, meeting his cruel, triumphant gaze directly. I let his words hang in the air for a beat, letting him savor his victory. Then I smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was small, quiet, and held entirely in my eyes. It was the smile of a project manager whose final inspection was complete. I said nothing. I just held his gaze for another second before turning and walking away, leaving him standing there, basking in the warmth of a fire that was about to consume him. The weeks that followed were a study in patience. The playground equipment arrived, and the sounds of construction, the clang of metal, the shouts of the crew were a balm to my soul. The nonprofits board accepted my personal donation of $500 to cover the shortfall, thanking me for my generosity. They never needed to know the truth. My life returned to its rhythm of spreadsheets and invoices, but underneath it all, a silent clock was ticking. I had lit a very long fuse, and I had no idea when or if it would reach the powder. 3 weeks to the day after I had walked out of the bank, leaving Henderson to his hollow victory, I walked back in. It was time to close my account. It was the final, quiet act of severing a 15-year relationship, and I wanted to be there in person to do it. The lobby was the same as ever. Brenda was helping an elderly couple, her voice a high-pitched coo. The air still smelled of carpet cleaner. I took my place in line, my heart a steady, even drum beat in my chest. When my turn came, I approached the same young teller who had processed my wire transfer. "I'd like to close my account, please," I said, sliding my debit card and driver's license across the counter. She looked surprised. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything we could have done better?" Before I could answer, the heavy glass doors of the bank swung open, admitting two people who immediately changed the room's atmosphere, a man and a woman, both in severe, dark business suits that made Henderson's look cheap. They carried slim leather briefcases and moved with an unnerving, synchronized purpose. They weren't here to open a savings account. They ignored the line, their eyes scanning the room until they landed on Henderson's glass-walled office. He was on the phone, laughing at something, one foot propped on his desk. They walked directly to his door and entered without knocking. From my spot at the counter, I had a perfect, unobstructed view. I saw Henderson's posture change. He dropped his foot, his smile faltering as he took in his uninvited guests. He ended his call abruptly and stood, plastering on his corporate welcome smile, assuming they were important clients. He extended a hand. The man in the suit ignored it. The teller in front of me was still fumbling with my account closure. "It's just going to be one more minute," she said, oblivious to the drama unfolding behind her. "Take your time," I murmured, my eyes glued to the silent movie in the office. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. The woman in the suit spoke first, her expression impassive. Henderson nodded, still smiling, though it was becoming strained. Then the man spoke, placing a thin file on Henderson's desk. Henderson glanced down at it. His smile vanished. It was as if a switch had been flipped. The smug, condescending branch manager I knew was gone, replaced by a man staring at a ghost. His face went slack, the color draining from it until it was the color of spoiled milk. His eyes, wide with dawning horror, darted from the file on his desk to the two stone-faced officials, and then, as if drawn by a magnetic force, they found me. Our eyes locked through the glass. In that moment, he knew. He didn't know how, but he knew I was the source. The sneer, the contempt, the mocking laughter, it all curdled on his face into a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. He saw the nobody, the small number, the woman with the sob story, and he finally understood that he hadn't been talking to a victim, he had been talking to his executioner. The woman in the suit said something, and Henderson flinched as if struck. He stumbled back, collapsing into his chair. He looked small, he looked powerless. He looked exactly how I had felt in this very same bank 3 weeks ago. The man in the suit turned his head slightly, and his voice, low and sharp, carried through the suddenly silent lobby. "Mr. Henderson, we have the initial complaint file right here. Complaint number 7-42B. It alleges predatory reclassification practices. It even quotes you directly. You are a number, and your number is too small to matter. We are here to determine exactly how many numbers you and Pioneer Bank decided were too small to matter. We will require access to every account record reclassified from a free to a fee-based structure for the past 36 months. Immediately." A collective, quiet gasp went through the teller line. Brenda's smile was frozen on her face. Henderson looked like he was going to be sick. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was a man standing on a trapdoor he had built himself, and the federal government had just pulled the lever. The teller slid a cashier's check for the remaining balance of my account across the counter toward me. "Here you are, ma'am. You're all set." I took the check, my hand perfectly steady. I didn't look at Henderson again. I didn't need to. The project was complete. The flaw in the design had been exposed, and the demolition was now underway. I turned and walked toward the door, my footsteps the only sound in the tomb-quiet bank. The inspection had begun. I walked out of the bank that day and never looked back. I shredded the cashier's check and let them mail me one for the final balance. A petty but satisfying final gesture. Life resumed. The playground was built, and the sound of children's laughter filled the space where a derelict warehouse once stood. I managed my budgets, chased my invoices, and treated every dollar like a sacred trust. But in the background, the world I had upended was quietly imploding. The first sign was a small article in the local business journal. Pioneer Community Bank undergoing regulatory review. Then came the rumors. Henderson had been fired, escorted from the building with a box of his personal effects. His generous severance package was reportedly rescinded. Branch managers across the state were in panicked, day-long meetings. Customers started whispering. The friendly neighborhood bank was suddenly a place of hushed tones and anxious faces. I had planted a seed of righteous chaos, and it was growing into a magnificent, thorny tree. The call came 6 weeks after the audit began. It was an unfamiliar number with a downtown area code. "Am I speaking with Sarah Jenkins?" a man's voice asked. It was smooth, professional, but stretched thin, like a wire pulled to its breaking point. "You are." "Ms. Jenkins, my name is Arthur Vance. I'm the general counsel for Pioneer Bank's corporate holding company. I understand you've had a less than satisfactory experience with us recently. I was hoping we might have a brief, informal chat." An informal chat. That's what they called it when the house was on fire and they were looking for the person holding the bucket of water. "I'm not sure what there is to talk about, Mr. Vance," I said coolly. "I've already had my chat with your bank." "Please," he said, and the professional veneer cracked. For the first time I heard it, the begging. It was subtle, buried under layers of legal training, but it was there, a desperate, raw plea. "Just 10 minutes of your time. We can come to you, whatever is most convenient." I let the silence hang for a moment, letting him stew in it. "There's a coffee shop on Elm and 3rd, the Daily Grind, tomorrow, 10 a.m., I told him. "I have a 10:15 meeting, so you'll have to be prompt." I hung up before he could reply. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a tiny 2-person table, his expensive suit looking out of place among the students and freelancers. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in a month. He stood as I approached, his face a mask of forced cordiality. "Ms. Jenkins, thank you for coming." "You have 10 minutes, I said, not sitting down. He swallowed, his composure fraying. "Right, I'll be direct. The review initiated by your complaint has expanded. It's causing significant operational and reputational harm. David Henderson's behavior was inexcusable, and he has been terminated. On behalf of the bank, I want to offer our most sincere apologies, and to offer you this as a token of our regret." He slid a check across the table. It was for $5,000, a paltry sum meant to placate me to buy my silence. It was an insult. I didn't even glance at it. Instead, I reached into my own bag and pulled out a single sheet of paper, folded in half. I placed it on the table next to his pathetic offering. "While I was reviewing your bank's terms and conditions, Mr. Vance, I found something else, a second vulnerability in your profit model. It's about your overdraft transaction sequencing. Your system is programmed to process debits from largest to smallest, rather than chronologically. It's a practice designed to maximize the number of overdraft fees for customers living paycheck to paycheck. It's technically disclosed, but it's predatory, it's abusive, and I suspect the CFPB would be very, very interested in adding it to their current audit." The last bit of color drained from his face. He knew. Of course he knew. It was another one of their dirty little secrets. He stared at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The lawyer was gone. All that was left was a terrified executive watching his company burn. "What do you want?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. I leaned in, my voice low and clear, a perfect echo of the power he once held over me. "Pay me my settlement, and maybe I won't report the second violation." His eyes darted around the coffee shop as if looking for an escape. "A settlement? For what? The $500? The $15 fee? We'll pay. We'll pay damages. Just name a number." I finally smiled. It was the same small, quiet smile I had given Henderson. The smile of a project manager presenting a final, non-negotiable budget. "This isn't about my $15 anymore. This is about every customer you laughed at. Every small number you decided didn't matter. You're not settling a complaint, Mr. Vance. You're funding a restitution. You will establish a settlement fund to repay every single customer affected by your automatic reclassification scheme with interest." He looked relieved for a fraction of a second, ready to agree. Then I delivered the final line item. The total damages come to $10 million. Think of it as the cost of avoiding a second federal investigation and the class action lawsuit that would follow. Think of it as your education in real-world finance. You have 24 hours to wire the funds to an escrow account my lawyer will establish. After that, the price goes up. The check from the settlement fund was delivered by a nervous courier who wouldn't make eye contact. It was for the final audited balance of the restitution fund I had forced Pioneer Bank to create. $10 million. Holding it felt different from holding the grant check that started it all. That one had felt like a promise. This one felt like a reckoning. It was the receipt for a war. One had won not with an army, but with a spreadsheet, a highlighter, and a well-worded complaint. The demolition of Pioneer Bank wasn't loud, but it was total. The $10 million was just the entry fee. The CFPB audit, spurred on by the second violation I'd handed them, uncovered years of predatory practices. The fines they ultimately paid dwarfed the settlement. They were forced to rebrand, scrubbing the words community and family from their name like stains they couldn't get out. They are now simply Pioneer Financial, a bland, neutered entity forever marked by the scandal. As for David Henderson, the man who laughed at me, his ruin was more personal. I saw him about 6 months later. I was filling up my car at a budget gas station on the edge of town. He was working the register, wearing a grease-stained polo shirt with a cheap, embroidered logo. His face was puffy, his eyes hollow. When he saw me, the recognition was instant, followed by a wave of pure, pathetic shame. He fumbled my change, his hands shaking. He couldn't even look at me. I didn't say a word. I just took my receipt and walked away. He hadn't just lost his job. He'd lost the arrogance that held him together. He was just a number now, and a very small one at that. The $10 million didn't change my life in the way most people would think. It wasn't my money. It was justice, itemized. My lawyer and I set up the escrow, and I took on the biggest project of my life, Project Restitution. I built a system to identify and contact every single customer who had been hit with the, quote, automatic reclassification fee. For months, my apartment was command central. I tracked down people who had moved, sent letters, and processed claims. The most satisfying part was signing the thousands of repayment checks, each one a small piece of vindication, a message that they did, in fact, matter. I still live in the same apartment. I still manage budgets with obsessive care, but my work has a new focus. The nonprofit world taught me how to fight for pennies. Pioneer Bank taught me how to fight for principles. I left the youth center in capable hands and started a small consulting firm from my kitchen table. I'm a consumer advocate, a forensic accountant for the little guy. People who have been wronged by banks, by insurance companies, by corporations that hide their greed in the fine print, they find me. I'm the person they call when they've been told they don't deserve it. I take their cases, I find the systemic flaws, and I build the indictments. It turns out that a talent for finding rounding errors on year-old receipts can be a powerful weapon when aimed at the right target. I never wanted to be a warrior, but I learned that sometimes the most effective armor is a well-researched binder of evidence. And that's how a $15 fee ended up costing a predatory bank its reputation and its fortune. That fight is over, but my work is just getting started. There are a lot of David Hendersons out there, a lot of companies who believe your number is too small to matter. I plan on proving them wrong, one case at a time. If you want to see who I take on next, you'll probably want to stick around for what's coming.